This is going to be my first real video, and this time we're going to be talking about sematotypes and how it correlates to the way you train. Sematotypes is a pretty uncommon word. I doubt most people know what it means, and the fact that I don't see it much on YouTube probably means that people don't really understand what it means. I know there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and a sematotype is basically the genetics of your body and your body composition, and there's three main categories that on a ratio you'd fall under, and those three categories would be ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. Now, endomorph is usually what the gym bros would call hard gainers, and those are people that no matter how much they eat, no matter how much they work out, they just can't seem to put on fat or muscle, and you usually see them as really skinny, sometimes really tall people. Mesomorphs are more your just average person. They both can gain muscle and fat at a decent rate, and they're just right in the middle of this spectrum that's going on. And endomorphs are larger people. They usually have more fat cells, they're more stockier, big boned, and the way that these sematotypes and your genetics combine really determines like how successful you'd be in a certain type of sport, or even the way you lift weights in the gym. And I think knowing your sematotype and being able to apply it to your training is very, very important, so you can get the most gains in whatever sport or lifting that you're doing. So if you're a endomorph, the bigger people, usually your sport would consist of something like in the gym, you'd be a power lifter or a person that lifts heavy weight, but not for many reps. You're not really going for muscle or endurance training. You're just going for absolute raw strength, the highest number on the bar you can get. And usually you'd see these people being like linemen in a football game or something of that nature. Powerlifters, strongmen, something like that. Mesomorphs, the thing that's cool about mesomorphs is that they fall right in the middle, so they have a good chance of getting into any sport they want, but they'll never be as good as a person that's 100% of another. Like if they wanted to be a strongman and there was a person that was quote unquote 100% endomorph, and I'll explain why you can't really be 100% of something. It falls into a spectrum. You're certain percentages of each thing, and even sometimes your body parts can be a certain type. Like, for example, my legs, I have different muscle fibers in my legs that require me to train it differently than I train any other muscle group, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But back to mesomorphs, you usually see them, they play in all types of sports, but I see a lot of them as people like running backs in football, and receivers and linebackers, things like that. They're really stocky, strong people, but they're still able to get around pretty fast, and they have really good like explosion, I guess. And the ectomorphs, the skinnier people, you usually most see them in things like marathons, cross country, track, soccer's a big one. There's probably more, but those are the big ones. And the way that these people have to train based on their genetics, the genetics can be different, and you can still fall into the category of an ectomorph, but usually they have to train with an extremely high amount of reps to see better gains than they would if they trained like an endomorph, training really heavy weight in low reps. And if you're going to the gym for the first time, I think knowing the way you should lift, with it being your intensity and how much really you should lift, like how much reps, not how much weight, you kind of have to test that for yourself based on your own strength standards. But usually you'd see a mesomorph, which is, when we talk about it in the gym, is usually the prime example of a bodybuilder. So you'd always see rep ranges between the 6 and the 12. You hear that a lot. 6 and 12 are like the prime hypertrophy rep ranges. And for strength, it would be 1 to 5 or 6. That's really high. I usually only see people going from 1 being their absolute max and then 3 being what they do at like their 75, 80, 85% of their max. And the ectomorphs, they do anything above 12 reps usually. Now, I think knowing these things and implementing them in your training or whatever sport you're doing really increases your success in whatever you're planning on doing and the goals you have in the future with that sport or the way you lift. How do you implement this into your training? Let's say you want to be a bodybuilder, and I told you that the rep range for that would be 6 to 12 reps. And that is true. To build muscle, the best, it's between 6 to 12 reps. But if you fall under the category ectomorph, then you want to do the higher of that standard because your body likes higher rep ranges better than lower ones, and you'll probably get better gains. Now, you do need to test this and see and how your body feels and likes it and whatnot to see if it's really working for you. So go to the gym and try it out and really optimize slow, controlled movements. It doesn't matter what kind of genetics you have, body composition, doesn't matter. Slow, controlled movements, both in the eccentric and concentric portions of a movement, will increase your muscle growth by astronomical amounts. Okay, so now we're going to go back to something I said previous in the video, which was something along the lines of your genetic composition or your somatotype kind of determines your success in certain sports, which is true to an extent, but I kind of wanted to give you examples of that. So if you have basically no training experience either in the gym or with sports, you can find a sport that you feel like you would be really good at based on the genetics that you have. And maybe you could ask your parents about this, say if they had played any sports, and see how well they did and see if this kind of theory is correct. So, like I said, ectomorphs are usually marathon runners, and endomorphs are usually big body people like linemen and things like that. And mesomorphs kind of fall in wherever they want to go based on their skill level in certain sports, how long they play and whatnot. But there are some things like genetic makeup that different things add up to do well in other sports, such as if you're in between an ectomorph and a mesomorph, you're actually a really, really prime body for mixed martial arts. Based on the certain types of genetics you get, I would say 9 times out of 10, you would probably be good at MMA because you have the endurance of an ectomorph, but as a mesomorph, you have the strength and the explosion and kind of the muscle mass to outpower anybody else while still being able to go the distance in a cage. And the reason I know that is because I personally fall under that category. I did mixed martial arts for a very long time, and I was actually extremely successful in it, and everything I said actually pertained exactly to me. Now, I can't really say anything about being a mesomorph and an endomorph because I don't have any experience with that because that's not what I am. But I'm sure if you are and you find a sport that kind of mixes those two things, you do very, very well. And that's all I really got on somatotypes for you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments or DM me on Insta. Like, subscribe, follow, bell button, all the good shit.